Hello, lovely people. Welcome to the future. Although it's not the future for you, it's the past. But what I mean is, this is 2026, and this is the first video of 2026. How else would we kick off a new year other than by reminiscing on the year which has just passed? That's not the healthiest thing in every context, but anyway, I felt like doing a bit of a ranking of all of the yarns that I knit with in 2025 because I realised that this is the first year that I've probably been averagely experimental with my choices. I used to be very pedestrian and pick the same things over and over again. So the way this is going to work is we're going to run through each of the yarns that I used this year. And they were for a variety of different projects. And most of the projects I have probably talked about in previous podcast episodes. So I'm not going to go too in depth, but I did think that I learnt a lot about what I like and dislike, and some of that useful knowledge could be passed on. And I am well aware that there will be people who have very different opinions to me, which is wonderful. And I don't expect anyone to agree or disagree with me, but if you are considering trying new things, then, you know, maybe there'll be something useful that I can share. So I have a little tier ranking graph, and apparently this in 2025 I used 15 different yarns from a variety of different brands, lots of them from similar brands, mainly drops, but hey ho, we're not going into that because that's a minefield. And I only have one cotton yarn, and the rest are all mainly wool, mohair, alpaca, animal fibre yarns. And I don't know whether to start with the best or the worst. Maybe I'll just do them in the order that they have been uploaded into this website. First on the list, we're going to stick with the West Yorkshire Spinners Croft Shetland Aran, which is a fabulous yarn, one which I like very, very much. And I think I used it for 2 or 3 different projects this year. One of them was frogged. That took a very long time. Oh well. One of them was a frog project, and so I am currently reusing it on my current whip. So I'll chat more about that in the future, whenever that whip is finished. But this is just a 100% wool Aran weight yarn. I'm fairly sure it's made in the UK. I think West Yorkshire Spinners still manufacture in the UK. I might be wrong, but they are definitely a British company. Quite an old yarn company as well. And you know, I like that. I think you should use things which are local to you. Not that it's not good to try yarns from different countries too, but you know, I definitely do a lot of that as well. And I will say about this is, in terms of classic Aran yarns, it's right on the mark because it's the perfect weight, perfect composition. It behaves just as an Aran should. If you are knitting, I'm talking about classic Aran garments, as in the cable jumpers, which come from the Isle of Aran, you know, where the yarn originated. I think it's absolutely perfect for that style of garment, and also for, you know, the many and varied uses of Aran weight yarn, which we've come to develop with modern knitting. But texturally, I think it's wonderful. I have a cardigan made from it, the Traveller's Cardigan by Ozetta, which has worn impeccably well. And to be fair, it is held with a mohair. So I don't know if I've ever used it as a single before in a project. So I can't really comment on how it will wear and pill when it's not reinforced by a mohair. But from my experience, it's been fantastic. I would say that this is on the softer side. It's definitely not a rustic yarn. I don't consider it, to be fair, I'm not very sensitive to scratchy yarn, and in fact, I quite like it texturally. But it's definitely on the softer side. It's probably not as soft as it would be if it were merino, but that's just the nature of the particular sheep, I think. I actually don't know what breed the composition is. I believe West Yorkshire Spinners also manufacture a double knit of their Croft line. And I haven't actually tried any of the speckled colourways, even though I would very much like to, if the right thing came up. Because I do think they've got an excellent colour selection, but I will say that it is limited. There are probably only, I don't know, 15 or 20 different colourways in this, so it's not the broadest in terms of the range of shades that's available. So that's the only reason that I'd really say it's not top tier, because, you know, you are limited to their small colorway, but the shades that they do have are all beautiful. I feel like we should stick with a theme, and I should do the other Aran weight yarn, which is on my list, which is kind of a very, very popular yarn, and some people love it, some people hate it, but it is Drops Nepal. I feel like this is a B category yarn, as in I have used it many times in the past, and I probably will use it again, but not because I want to. The only redeeming feature of this yarn is the fact that it's got an averagely broad shade range. The price is very, very accessible, and the hand feel is really lovely because this is actually an alpaca wool blend. I know that Drops also do 100% wool superwash Aran. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Alaska. Is it Alaska or is that the double knit? No, it is Alaska. Which I've used once in the past, but probably wouldn't again, just by nature of the fact that I'm not a great lover of a superwash yarn. But I know that they are very, very similar, apart from the composition, and obviously the fact that one was superwash. Okay, not that similar, but you know what you're getting with Drops, and I think the price is one of the main reasons that certainly I continue to buy it because I'm on a budget, I'll be honest. The one thing I have to say about Drops Nepal is that I have noticed it does pill quite significantly, but then it is a much softer yarn, and anything which is softer is going to be more prone to pilling. And I don't think that the pills are difficult to remove at all, but it just takes that extra little bit of care if you get a lot of wear out of it. Number 3 on the list is a sock yarn. And I will say that I'm not a sock knitter. I do not enjoy knitting socks, so it's not often that I get an excuse to try a new sock yarn. But apparently this year I decided that I would. So the one pair of socks, no, I think I finished two. Did I finish 2 pairs of socks? One of the 2 pairs of socks, which I finished in 2025, was knit with Coupnits socks, yeah, DK. And this was purely because I thought that the shades that they had available when I bought it online were lovely, and they had exactly the colours that I was looking for because I had a very specific mental image of what I was wanting to make. So, all in all, very positive experience with Coupnits. Um, is this A? Is this B? I don't know. Would I use it again? Yeah, I think I would. I think the main reason that I've been saying that I wouldn't is because I don't like to knit a lot of socks, and I'm not feeling inclined to knit any anytime soon. But if I had the choice, it's definitely a yarn that I would purchase again for a different pair of socks. I know that the composition of the sock share DK is mainly wool, possibly merino, but I'm not 100% sure. And then a little bit of nylon or polyamide as well for stability. Can't remember which. Probably should have looked that up. Anyway, never mind. But I know that the reason that it felted is because it is a very, very soft yarn, and so it does mean that the socks are lovely to wear, but they are prone to that little bit of felting on the tension points, which everybody knows about in socks. So I can't really complain because it is the nature of the beast. I don't think I remember the shade range for this being massively significant, but the shades that they do have are all very lovely and unique. And I think in the normal 4-ply fingering weight sock share, they might have a broader shade range. So I think you can always make that work with whatever you've got planned. Ooh, next up is the one and only cotton yarn or summer yarn, which I've got on the list, which is the Rico Essentials Cotton DK, and that is top tier. I only made one project with that, but I'm also not really a big seasonal knitting person, mainly because I live in the UK and we don't get the weather. But I did knit a skirt this year out of cotton yarn, this cotton yarn, and would totally use it again any day of the week. It's already been through the washing machine a handful of times as well, and it's held up immaculately well. It has gone slightly duller than it was when it was new, but the colours haven't washed at all. When I say duller, I mean that the shine on the cotton has dulled, but not the dye at all. It also didn't really bleed when it was washed, which was great, especially because one of the colours that I used was navy blue and is always prone to bleeding a little bit. But I will say that it is one of the most comfortable cottons that I've ever used because I don't particularly love the tension when knitting with cotton. I think that's part of the reason that I stay away from summer garments as well. But it's the smoothest, shiniest, nicest looking thing whenever it's knit up. So if I were to go back and use a cotton yarn again, I think I'd definitely return to this one. Unfortunately, I can't comment on the colours which are available because I can't remember. But it's a Rico yarn, so it's, you know, mass produced. And I think I did buy it in a physical shop where they didn't have a lot of stock, so I probably didn't get exposed to the true shade range available. But I think it's pretty good from memory. Now, this is a bit of a beast, and I feel like this opinion might get me cancelled. But absolute dead last in my ranking, all day and every day, has to be Drops Air. I don't know if I can put into words how much I hate it, quite frankly. And maybe I'm being a little bit judgmental and a little bit unfair, but I just don't like blown yarn. I don't know if I ever will. I've used it on a few occasions for different projects, once for a baby garment and then once held double to make a bulky weight for an adult garment. I cannot stand it. It is the messiest thing I've ever used. So Drops Air is alpaca with a nylon mesh core, I believe. The alpaca goes everywhere. The whole house covered in fluff. I personally also suffer with a pretty terrible dust allergy, and I notice that whenever I use alpaca in particular, it sets me off often. And this is not just for blown yarns, but even spun alpaca yarns I've had issues with in the past. So I always have to be a bit careful whenever I'm knitting with them because I don't know what it is about alpaca. Maybe the fibers are a bit more slippery than wool, so they shed more. That can't be right. Anyway, um, I noticed with Drops Air it was a particular issue because every time that you pull that centre pull strand of yarn out of the ball, there's just chunks of fibre that get flung off it. So it's a handling, and I don't like it. And also, uh, I do think that I have been disappointed in the past, and this is actually a bit of a universal drops problem. Again, I temper my strong opinions on it by the fact that it's cheap and it's what I can afford at the moment. Um, the dye lots within each shade can be very inconsistent, so I have had problems before buying yarns, and also the way that they can be photographed online. Because I actually don't have a drops retailer near me, because I know that for many reasons there are not many that stock it in physical local yarn shops. So I do often end up having to buy it online, but the colours are not very truthful, and I do wonder if part of that is because of the variation in dye lots. And I know with Drops Air in particular, that's when I've noticed it in the past, more than on some of their other maybe woolen yarns. But other than that, the colours look cheap. The colours are so boring and flat. And yes, the range is pretty good, but they're never the colour that you want. It's always just the next best thing. And I think that combined with the fact that it's an absolute pain to work with, combined with the fact that in my experience, the wear is appalling. I don't know if this is universal for blown yarns, and I would like somebody to tell me because I actually haven't was so put off using them. I've never knit with another one, so I've never tried very popular yarns like Lang Cloud or whatever. The core just flattens almost immediately after wearing, and it goes so limp and lifeless. And granted, whenever your finished object is new, it looks lovely and fluffy and chunky, but that doesn't last long. I also find that the alpaca tends to clump instead of pilling, so it gets this kind of like fleecy texture, which I think is basically irreversible because you can't exactly comb or shave it out the way that you would with pills on wool. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Anyway, I'm sure that there are a lot of applications where Drops Air might be a preference, and I know that for comfort, a lot of people like alpaca, and especially blown alpaca because it's much, much lighter. And I think it's quite comfortable near the skin. I'm not particularly sensitive to any type of yarn, so I'm not really the person to ask. But that's the reason that for me, it always has to be absolutely dead last. Actually, while I'm here expressing my hatred for alpaca, I have to put the alpaca silk right down at the bottom because I've had some truly, truly terrible experiences with that this year. I attempted to knit a cloud blouse by Petite Knit out of 2 strands of brushed alpaca silk by Drops, and absolutely hated every minute of it. And I do think that the yarn is not totally to blame. It was a bad choice on my part for that pattern. But the tension, the same way knitting with 2 strands of mohair is a little bit tedious. The tension with the alpaca silk, the fact that you cannot see a single stitch and frogging is basically impossible, made it a totally unenjoyable experience. And so I did end up discarding that object. So I will say it has slightly redeemed itself since, because I did use it probably for its intended purpose, which is held with a 4-ply woolen yarn in a new finished object that I'm going to talk about a bit more in the next podcast episode. And to be honest, even though I've not worn that yet, it's actually just blocking downstairs as we speak. So I don't know how the wear is going to be over time. The fabric, which resulted from the brushed alpaca, a strand of mohair, and a 4-ply strand of woolen spun yarn, was really, really excellent, and I loved the texture a lot. So even though I still have complaints about brushed alpaca, it's, you know, they've slightly upped their game, in my view. Will I use it again? Probably not, purely because, again, my allergies are terrible and it is such a nightmare to work with. But if I was looking to get the same fabric which I have on my summer farm jumper that I'm going to talk about in the next episode, then I probably would go back to it. But I think I would probably like to try some of the other brushed alpaca yarns from different brands first before returning to Drops. I'm going to move on to one of my all-time favourite yarn brands, which is Noro. I have never in my life been disappointed by a Noro yarn, and I'm glad, because the price that that stuff costs, I would probably have to send it back if I was. But I actually used 2 Noro yarns this year, so I'm probably going to talk about them both at the same time. And I think they actually probably both rank equally for me, which is in the A band. Can I pick up a picture? Yeah, I can. And this is Noro Ito and Noro Madara, which are both Aran weight yarns from Noro, and they're both 100% wool as well. The Noro Ito I have used before, but the Madara was a new buy for me this year, and I will say I was very impressed. It is just eye-wateringly expensive, but to be honest, it's well worth it because they're just beautiful. Ito definitely has, well, I think what sets it apart is the fact that the colorways are all a gradient, so they're all stunning depending on what you're looking for in their own way. I've used 2 of them in the past, and yeah, never been disappointed. They also come in huge, great 200-gram balls, which is very useful if you're trying to minimize ends and weaving in. Although I will say, especially with Noro, I have noticed a tendency for there to be factory knots in a lot of their yarn, which is fine because I understand that these both yarns are single ply, and you're more likely to get breaks and things when you're winding single ply. With Ito, it can be a little bit infuriating because sometimes the factory knots occur and break the gradient pattern. So that can be slightly bothersome to some people, depending on your preference. I've found that in the jumper that I was making with it, it happened at points where I could kind of get around it, and also it was missing a short enough stretch of yarn that it wasn't really noticeable in the overall like tonal gradient. But I think if you were missing a big chunk or if it had been mismatched, that would be quite annoying for me personally. But the Madara, these are generally kind of unicolor with flex. So for any factory knots in the Madara are kind of unnoticeable. Although that being said, I have only used one of the dark brown colorways of that, so I don't know how that translates to some of the other shades. But hey, again, the wear on them is brilliant. They do pill like any woolen yarn, but the pills are not very prominent. And I have found that once it's got a kind of baseline level of wear, it stays pretty consistent, and I don't have to go deep pilling every single time I wear it because it tends to not generate much more. Once all of the fibers have kind of been roughed up a little bit, it stays pretty solid. Again, I would definitely buy these again if I I don't know, win the lottery or can afford it. Next up, I'm going to chat about, unfortunately, the only mohair which I have ever used, which is the Drops Kid Silk. This is very much middle of the road choice, and I have no issues with it. I use it and will continue to use it on basically all projects that require mohair. I would love to try mohair from other brands. Again, it's just a budget thing, but it is very, very expensive fibre, so that's what you get. I'm liking the fact that they've recently introduced some more shades to the range, because it was definitely missing quite a lot when you were looking for particular matches, or I don't know, if you had something in mind. But again, I don't really have any issues with the Kid Silk. I think that's part of the reason that I'm also slightly reluctant to branch out, because it's such a non-issue. I don't have problems with the way it feels, I don't have problems with how it is to work. I've always been able to find roughly the right shade that I need for a project, and it's the cheapest option. So yeah, again, very much neither here nor there on that one. So in 2025, I did discover a new favourite, which is the Istex Alafoss Lopi chunky weight yarn. I never thought I would say that a favourite yarn was a chunky weight yarn, but this, I don't know, defies everything. I used this first for my Planet sweater by Laura Dalgard, and then again for a self-drafted sweater earlier in the autumn. And each time it's just been fantastic. I think my favourite thing about Alafoss Lopi is the colour range, because they're all stunning and they do a great mix of unicolor and kind of slightly tweed or flecked yarns as well. It also is sold by my local yarn store, so it's very helpful being able to go in person and see what I'm looking for. But again, I think my biggest pet peeve with chunky weight yarn before I discovered this was the fact that I always thought that it looked kind of amateur. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I think it was just that we all have this association that it's used for people's like first projects, and it was used for my first project as well. And I think generally the type of chunky yarns that you find in big box craft shops like Hobbycraft or whatever are all like very bright rainbow or neon colours, or often are not wool and are usually acrylic or whatever. And so it was nice to find something that was a little bit more wearable for me, which Alafoss Lopi definitely is. But the best thing about Alafoss Lopi, can't even say it now. The best thing about Alafoss Lopi is definitely the finish and the wear, because it does not pill. Or that's a lie, it does pill, but it barely pills at all. Occasionally, I don't know, once a month or whatever, and I wear my jumpers a lot. I'll go by and like pick off 2 small clumps, and that's about it. Other than that, they basically blend in and are completely unnoticeable. So it probably wouldn't even matter if you didn't have the energy to depill anything ever, because it just doesn't seem to generate any. I think it's because the fibres are very rustic. I will say that for me, it's a great yarn. For somebody else who's more sensitive to rustic or scratchy yarn textures, probably not a great option. But then again, if you're wearing t-shirts under things, like, you can probably make it work. I will say that I do have a hat made from it, which occasionally bothers me slightly on my forehead, and I think that was actually pointed out to a commenter, and they were very right, that it has a tendency to scratch whenever you get a bit warm. But luckily I have a fringe, so that's kind of like cushioning, and means that I can still wear the hat because it's incredibly warm. But again, whenever I'm looking at a bulky weight pattern in the future, it's probably the only thing that I will use. So our second to last for today is the second sock yarn, which I managed to use this year, which was actually just Drops Fabel. And do you know what? I'm unlikely to use it again, but I don't hate it. It's just boring. I think it's perfectly fine. I think the wear on it is fine. I think the colours are fine. They are not that impressive. You're not going to be blown away by the shade range or anything. It's averagely comfortable to knit with. It's superwash and has a bit of polyamide in it, so it's not gonna felt especially. Again, it's just very middle of the road. I have no opinions. I probably won't use it again just because I'm not that inclined to knit socks, but if you're looking for a cheap sock yarn, if you gift knitting socks, whatever, it's pretty good. I don't think it would be particularly bothersome for anybody. I know that they also have some variegated colourways, which would be exciting to try. I only tried the unicolor version. But again, I can't really complain. I'm really struggling for things to say about it because I feel so little. And last but not least, for 2025, I'm going to try and get through this before my camera runs out of battery because it's just gone onto the red. So this is Rauma Finull, which I absolutely loved. I used this for the Zachary cardigan and I would use it again any day of the week. It's an excellent semi-rustic sport weight or jumper weight yarn. So if you're looking to do anything with colour work or anything with steeking, it's probably a perfect choice. It's got a really fantastic shade range. The price is very appropriate, and I think the finish and the comfort while I was working with it is everything I could have wanted. I used it held double, so it is quite tense, but it creates a really nice dense fabric if you are holding it double, and is probably close to like an Aran weight or something. But I have worn the cardigan quite a few times since I finished it in, I think, November or maybe the start of December, and it has worn beautifully. There has been absolutely no pilling at all, and I will say that it is softer than any of the other kind of Shetland or jumper weight yarns that I've used, because this is a Norwegian brand for reference. So if you are a little bit funny about some of the classic choices for colour work, this might be a good option for you, because it will mean that it's a little bit more comfortable to wear, but it still serves the same purpose of having the kind of toothiness and grip that you need for good Fair Isle or for steeking projects. So again, I'd heartily recommend. Okay, I'm going to have to say goodbye very quickly because I'm really afraid that my camera's going to die. I'm going to be back before the end of the month with a sewing project, just to switch things up a little bit. So hopefully I'll chat to you again there. I hope everyone has had a wonderful new year and is enjoying settling back into life and work and all of that. But if I don't see you soon, have a lovely week.